I'm now joined by political researcher Robert Graziani, who was the person who identified that the US had been funding research at the Wuhan Institute. You heard it here first. The US Senate is only now catching up to it. Robert, thanks for your time, and I appreciate your insights into this. But why has it taken so long for the real background to this virus to become into the public domain?
Yes. Good evening, Cory. Thanks for having me again. It is curious, isn't it? We're now 15, 16 months into the virus now, and we're only finding out some very, very interesting fundamentals about it and how it got around the world, and maybe who the fathers of it were, i.e. Peter Daszak of Eco Health Alliance, not-for-profit headquartered in the New York City, and Dr. Fauci, who, everyone knows Dr. Fauci right across the Western world. He's the little guy that's head of NIAID, and he continues to be on our TV screens, giving us mixed messages and pretty well inverted advice from weeks and months ago.
Well, how anybody can trust this bloke, Dr. Fauci, right? He gives contradictory advice. Border lockdowns were unnecessary. This was going to be like a flu. Then you've got to wear masks. You're not allowed to wear masks. You've got to get vaccinated. But what he didn't disclose was that his organisation gave money to the groups that were researching this gain of function in bat coronaviruses, and that ultimately was deemed to be too dangerous and sent it over to Wuhan. He is at the head of this stuff, and he's tried to cover all of this up. It just smacks of a disgraceful sort of cover-up to blame everyone else for their own failings, doesn't it?
Indeed. This is probably one of the first things the US and the Western world should have found out about with the breaking this virus, this pandemic. Dr. Fauci was on our screens from January onwards of last year, and he was absolutely silent. He was absolutely mum on all this sort of stuff. And he knows very well that research on bat coronaviruses, gain-of-function experiments have been conducted firstly in the US and then transferred across to China in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, one of the few P4 labs, I believe, in China. And that's been going on for at least the Trump term. And he was also... He's also captured on video about a week before Trump got inaugurated in January 2017, saying in very, very certain terms that there is no doubt that the US administration in the coming 4-year term will face a pandemic. Well,
I don't want to say it's engineered because I'm not going to go there, right? It could have been a lapse from the Wuhan laboratory, but it has been seized upon by leftists all around the world to radically change the agenda for Western civilization. We've seen freedoms curtailed. We've seen this contradictory results to come out. We've seen alarmism that has peddled. It's scared people into all sorts of mental health issues. And it's like every time we seem to be becoming a bit immune to their scare campaign or their fear campaign, they cook up another one in another country and another sort of evolved virus, another strain that's even more deadly than the one before. Why should we believe them?
Yes, they for those paying attention and still have their critical thinking faculties with them, they would be losing a lot of credibility because, in the early days, it was not airborne. It wasn't subject to airborne transmission, and then it was. Then it was the surfaces outside and on bench tops and park benches, etc., where some of the greatest risks lie. And so, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. But then about maybe 6, 7, 8 months later, we all started learning from these experts that, it's not so much contracted by surfaces, but instead by airborne droplets. They're just very real fundamentals, which are pretty extraordinary. And then masks don't work, then they do work, then they don't work, or at least 2 and 3 may work better than 1 or 2. It just the almost the inversions and the version 1, 2, and 3 of what do you call it? The requirements,
the strains that have developed. Yeah. It's amazing, and of course, when you see people like Joe Biden, right, who clearly doesn't know what he's doing, but when you see people like Biden say you've got to be vaccinated or wear a mask, well, he was vaccinated, but he still wears his mask outside even though the research says you don't need to. It's like they don't know what they're doing, but they're using this as an excuse to do whatever they want.
Yes, it's somewhat of a totalitarian's dream, this pandemic, especially when you start getting into lockdown territory and then opening up on conditions, because then you can start defining the conditions and you can start making sure you segregate the society with obedience and dissidence. We notice I think in the last 24 hours, the Biden administration has announced that you don't have to wear a mask finally if you've been fully vaccinated and you had your 2 weeks since. But for those that haven't, you got to stay wearing a mask. Now, we can see in a few days' time, or maybe in 2-3 weeks' time, commentary will come out saying, well, how do people know or authorities know whether people have been vaccinated or not, as to whether they should be wearing a mask or not. And you can see that the mainstream media will start nudging us towards, we're going to have some sort of proof of vaccination such that you can continue going on not wearing a mask in public life.
Yeah, this is the problem. They're going to deliver the COVID passports. You're not going to be able to go on an airplane or go to the pub or do anything that people would like to do without this voluntary vaccination, which I'm going to tell you is experimental. They simply haven't done the research into it for long enough. That's my particular view on it. And it is extraordinary that people are not asking more and more questions about what has transpired in the last 12 months. We have seen, Robert, the green totalitarian nightmare come to life, because all the Greens policies about global coordination, about suppressing industry, about shutting down the might of small business, about curtailing people's liberties, all in the name of saving the planet or health or whatever, has come to pass. Conservative governments have abandoned fiscal rectitude. They've given up. You've now got the Labor Party stealing lines from Ronald Reagan and the Liberal Party in this country spending money that 3 generations won't be able to pay back. The world has been turned on its head, and I think there's something much more at work than simply a health crisis. Robert Graziani, your insights are always valuable. Is there anything special that you need to tell us tonight? Anything that's coming up that is going to be a couple of months ahead of what we're going to hear elsewhere?
Well, I just think they're going to very quickly, Peter Daszak and his Eco Health Alliance, they sort of combining climate change and environmental disruption with global health and safety. And so you can see that if they keep covering up these gain-of-function lab experiments, and trick us all into thinking that these viruses, these pandemic viruses, come naturally, then you can see how the narrative will turn to, well, we've got to go harder on climate change and be easier and friendlier on Mother Earth and the environment. Otherwise, she's going to respond and throw up these future pandemics that none of us all want to go through, in which case we better go harder at the Glasgow conference.
Yeah. Yeah, Gratz, unless we start getting ourselves together and pushing back against this, I think the world will never go back to the way it was, which I think is a great pity. Robert Graziani, I really appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining me on Bernardi tonight.
You're welcome, Cory. Cheers.